Good morning. It's May 25th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards live daily show, Monday to Friday. Aside from holidays, we run from 11:30 a.m. Western Mountain Standard Time. I like to think Western more, though, till about 1 o'clock. Usually have a couple of guests on. And yes, I like to invite everybody, seeing Claudette, Knucklehead, Ellen, all greeting us there. Being live, let's interact, guys. Get those comments going. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you're about. I won't necessarily read them all. I read them all. I won't necessarily bring them all up, but it helps keep that dialogue going, makes this live format that much more fluid and keep things going as news break. And perhaps, you can send some ideas towards the guests that I could put out for questions and answer some of yours as well. Let's see. Debbie in Nova Scotia. I love it. And Ellen in Vancouver. Seeing people from across the country on this sort of thing. It just helps to know we're reaching out to a lot of areas and helps broaden those discussions. Keeps me from getting too Alberta-centric because we do a heck of a lot from out here in the West as well. But we've got a lot of national issues. On the national front, for the daily observances, the important things to watch. And it's been some pretty horrible news lately. You know what? It could be a good day for some people who can, anyways, to tip back a glass of wine and just try to reflect and think about things and relax a little bit. We got to carry on and enjoy life a bit. And it is National Wine Day. That's the day to do it. It's also National Towel Day. I don't know where they come up with this stuff, but I look it up. They have one every day, as we can see, with the frog sitting there all toweled up. It's important. And at the rate that the flames are going, there might be some need for crying towels in the near future as the Battle of Alberta seems to be fizzling out. But we'll see. It's not over yet. But last night didn't look terribly promising for the Flames. We'll certainly say that. But at the end of this, one way or another, somebody's going to be crying. So make sure to remember it's National Towel Day. All right, I've got a couple of good guests on today. As always, Michelle Stirling from Friends of Science. A lot of our viewers are familiar with her. She's very outspoken with Friends of Science, covers a lot of things out on social media and with their blog and site like that. We're going to talk about the World Economic Forum. Oh, yeah, everybody's favorite subject, everybody's favorite group. And their environmental plans, because they got a lot of them. And there's a lot of influential political people attending their meeting talking about some pretty big things there and changes. And also, I'm going to have our Western Standard columnist, Dave Makichuk, on. We're going to talk about Tamara Lich, who they did find was allowed at least to stay out and not have her bail revoked because she responded to an email. Real generous. Going after this woman, they just will not lay off. They really want to drive her to the ground. So we're going to talk about that. Knucklehead pointing out Towel Day is for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans. Yes, the trilogy in 4 parts from Douglas. I should have thought that that's where that reference came from, of course. And if you are going to travel the galaxy, having a towel is one of your essential things. What was it Arthur Dent had to take with him during his training? For the people who haven't read that series, it is fantastic. It's a good read. All right, so I'll get off the light note. My opening monologue, it's not going to be as ranty as it usually is. It's more just frustrated, dejected, sad. I mean, we came in yesterday from lunch and the news was breaking and it was horrible. Another mass shooting in the United States, in a school, in an elementary school. Everybody's seen the news on it now. And it's just awful. Look, we can't deny it. We just can't deny it. The USA is being plagued by school shootings in a way like no other country on earth. So, I mean, yesterday's slaughter, and that's what it was, slaughter of 19 children and 2 adults, at least to date. It seems like every time I turn on the TV, there's another one gone. It was the 27th American school shooting this year in the United States, just this year. And nobody can look at those numbers and pretend there isn't a problem. And I mean, think about this. Despite even 21 people being killed, 19 of them children, that shooting yesterday was still only the second most deadly of American school shootings. So outside of schools, the USA has had 212 mass shootings just in 2022 alone. These are shootings where 4 or more people are shot. I mean, and there's been 20-some school shootings this year, just in the last 6 months, 27 of them. Something's wrong, guys. We can't deny this. We can't look the other way. And there's no magic bullet. There's no simple solution. There's no quick one. But the Americans need to seriously start seeking one. I mean, the post-shooting knee-jerk reactions from politicos is already typical. The fact that there's typical reactions to these tragedies is indicative in itself, though, on how common they're becoming. I mean, there's calls for outright bans of firearms. Those come immediately, and that's not realistic and it's simplistic. But at the same time, maybe there's room to look at things. There's room to talk about how free the access to firearms is. I mean, come on, we've got to start looking at stuff here. Something's wrong. Waiting periods, background checks, perhaps, because some Second Amendment people don't even think there should be a background check. So we've got to examine what's going on there. I mean, those are far from foolproof, but they might start working towards mitigating some of this carnage. Maybe those measures would be useless, but let's have a rational discussion. That's what we have to have on this. And it's hard to be rational with something so emotional. Left, right, or center, no society, no people ever want to see children murdered like that. It's awful. I mean, there's some others who are claiming that loosening the firearms laws up would help with the notion that people openly carrying firearms would act as a preventative measure. I'm not so bad on open carry, but I don't know if it would stop that. I can't see it. Texas is an open carry state, and there aren't many examples to indicate it helped. It certainly didn't yesterday. Now we got to look at some of the numbers. I mean, the Americans have the most civilian guns per capita than any other country on the planet. They have 120 guns for every 100 people. They have more civilian firearms than actual civilians. So the next closest country is the Falkland Islands with 62 per 100. I mean, the Americans have more than twice as much as the next country after that. I mean, I'm not talking about moving towards disarming all citizens, but we've got to look at that. It's a contributing factor. Obviously, the number of people who have these firearms is contributing to this somehow. I mean, Canada, though, is among the top nations, actually, believe it or not, with firearms per capita at 13th. With 34.7 per 100, but that's still a quarter of the number that Americans have. Now, is Canada experiencing a quarter of the mass shootings and school shootings, though? No, not even close. The Nova Scotia rampage of 2020 demonstrated we're not immune to mass shootings, but thankfully, certainly comparatively with the United States, we have far, far fewer of them, even when factored in with the smaller population and the smaller amount of guns. So it's not just a matter of large population. It's not a matter of the large guns alone. That means the shooting trend south of the border has some sort of cultural underpinnings. And that makes it all the more complex, but it makes it all the more important to study and try and understand what's causing all this. It isn't happening in other countries. It isn't. So we need to understand why. These things didn't happen with such frequency in years gone by either. I mean, there have been mass shootings since the invention of the gun, but they've been escalating. In the 60s and 70s, it was common to see rifles in the back windows of pickup trucks in school parking lots in both Canada and the USA, or at least in smaller towns. There was no rash of shootings due to that. So what changed? What happened? I have more questions today than answers. Usually I'm full of answers, I'm full of opinion, I'm full of thoughts. I still have a lot of that in me, but with this issue, I don't have the answers, but I've got a lot of questions. And we got to start asking these questions right now. The only thing I can say conclusively, though, is that things have to change. We have to admit there's a problem, or at least the Americans do. I understand we are related to the States and we have a lot of friends and family down there. Many reactions over the next few days are going to be heated and without thought. But when things cool down, let's hope a serious discussion on this issue begins. I love my American neighbors. I just returned from a visit south of the border last Monday. I know Americans aren't some bunch of violent thugs who shrug off the murder of their children. Their nation is mourning the senseless deaths of 19 children right now, and I'm mourning the waste of those young lives from afar. We have to look away for a change, and it's hard for us, especially as political types, but we got to look away from the political and ideological lines we've drawn in the sand and look to real solutions to this terrible and growing problem with mass shootings in the USA. It's real. Until activists and politicians are capable, though, of setting aside that ideology and drawing those lines, I fear we're going to be seeing more shootings in the years to come. So let's look at this, look at it carefully, guys, and try to have a rational conversation. That's just where I'm sitting on that one. I don't know what else I can say about it, but we got to stop this. It's just horrible to keep beholding. I don't want to keep turning on the news and seeing more of these. So set aside the politics and start thinking about things, folks. And, Donna saying have a cop in each school. Well, why don't we have a cop in each classroom? Why don't we have a cop in each parent's car? We got to be reasonable to the extent, but I understand it's a potential solution, more security. But having more security isn't getting to the basis of the problem. The problem is that there's people picking up guns that want to slaughter children. We got to get to the root because they're still going to be there. They're still going to be looking. I mean, you can't protect everything all the time. But I don't want to knock Donna for putting out a suggestion because that's what we need, suggestions. We need discussion. We need to look at this and find out what happened. And not just yesterday, but over and over. 27 times in 6 months in schools, people. Like, this is beyond the pale. And I just don't want to see it anymore. So let's hope we finally just start to learn from this. All right, let's get on to some more news with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and bring him in. There's some other things going on. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going okay, Cory. Just a terrible story, isn't it? Our Mel Risden is working on a piece right now. All those dead children were in one classroom. This bastard barricaded himself into a classroom and then killed every one of those kids one by one. I just can't imagine the horror and the terror that they felt. It's unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. Let's hope they come up with a solution. But these things have happened before, and there's been no solution. So I am not sure there will be one on this time. Arlinda Slobodian has filed a column on it already. She's taking President Biden to task over his emotional speech last night. Linda says it was just a case of him politicizing it and not going to the root of the problems. We've got another story up there on the federal conservatives are calling for an investigation into the Liberal labor minister, trade minister. She gave a $17,000 contract to one of her good friends during the COVID vaccination, or during the COVID pandemic, excuse me. And the conservatives are saying that's not quite right. Mel Risden, before the shooting story, just got back from a Canadian Taxpayers Federation press conference where they handed out the annual Teddy Awards. These are awards politicians do not want to get because it highlights wasteful spending of taxpayers' money. And there's some pretty egregious cases this year for people to read about, Cory. Interesting case in Quebec, guy in Montreal who bought a Chevy Bolt, says the performance of the electric vehicle in winter was a debacle, and he's trying to get a class action lawsuit certified to try and get his $38,000 back that he paid for an electric vehicle that didn't work well in Canadian winters. And as you mentioned, Tamara Lich does not have to worry about going back to jail for the time being. A judge has said she can stay out on bail and even go to Ontario to accept that award from the Justice Center. So those are the main highlights, Cory. Got to admit, I'm a bit worried that this will be the sort of the second last day of the playoff beard, though. Not at all confident the Flames can get a victory on Thursday.
We will see. I see, as one of the commenters pointed out, though, you can get back. He called you the chickadee magnet, and you can focus on the bigger issue of your aggravation being your morning chickadee waking you up. So
that is a good point. Thanks to the viewer for that. I'd almost forgotten about that.
Well, I mean, since the Battle of Alberta began, you forgot about your chickadee, so you'll have to get back to it.
I will concentrate on getting that little bugger.
All right. Well, thanks for checking in, Dave, and we'll see if it's one of the last times of that fabulous beard you've been growing there.
Thanks, man.
Great, thanks. So I see a couple of comments, and again, see, I don't want to dismiss any. There's something I got to watch just because I disagree with some of the solutions people are pointing out with what I was talking about before. Well, no, that's what I've got to stop doing too. We need to examine everything and try and find out, because I don't think there is any one factor on what's going on. Just getting back to my opening there. I don't think there's any simple thing. So we've got to look at everything, and we got to take every suggestion seriously. Wendy pointing out, is it the video games out there? I don't think you could point at that as a sole problem. I mean, the kids in Canada and Europe have the same ones, and we have a lot of firearms here, and we still aren't seeing that sort of thing. But that could be a contributing factor. I mean, they sensationalize and desensitize some people to the thought of pulling triggers and running around. I mean, for people who are mentally ill, and as of others have pointed out, Jeannie Nielsen saying, we need to focus on mental health. Absolutely. Nobody who would do that doesn't have mental health issues. Nobody's sane goes out and murders their fellow people, particularly children. So we have to look at that, and we can't dismiss what anybody else is pointing out. As I said, with somebody pointing out having security in schools, and I kind of dismissed that initially, and I shouldn't have. No, that's one other element, that's one other aspect. If we really want to prevent, we need to open the dialogue, set aside our existing political biases, and try and see how we can get to a solution. Some proposed solutions will be wrong, some will be right. And if we don't have the discussion, we won't find them for sure. That's the main thing, because I don't want to see that on the TV anymore, or at least not nearly as much as we have. It's just horrible. All right, let's talk about some of the stuff in the news. We've got our guest in the lobby. We'll get to her pretty soon. And that is, just that reminder to everybody, the reason we can have these news coverage, our news editor, our people across the country covering these things, is because of you guys who have been subscribing. So thank you. I always like to start with thanking you guys. This is the way we can keep independent news, not be beholden to the government or any other subsidies. We qualify for them. We will not take them. So you guys who've been subscribing, hey, you're the reason we can do this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please get on there, check it out, westernstandard.news/membership. And, for $99 a year or $10 if a month, if you want to go month to month, it's less than a newspaper subscription used to cost you. And we put out a great deal of stories, original content, columns, opinion stuff every day. It's well worth it. We're not asking for charity. We're not asking for donations. We create a product. We're asking for you guys to pitch in and buy it, and we'll give you a service for it. And the more people subscribe, the more we can cover, and this cycle just continues. So, yes, please take out those memberships. They are important to us. So, let's see what else we've got. The Battle of Alberta. That is a big one going on. The Flames really looked pretty gnarly last night, guys. It's funny because one of the things is a good news story, or it was, is seeing people out celebrating things and enjoying themselves, talking about mental health in general, stresses, things on people. We need to smile more. We need to get out more. We need to socialize more. How many of the symptoms of some of this antisocial or horrible stuff? Again, there's dozens of contributing factors to all sorts of things. But I think we're seeing some consequences also of 2 years of misery, 2 years of hiding our faces from each other with masks, 2 years of separating each other from our families and friends, cracking down on people from doing business, from interacting in schools in the first place, the closures of schools constantly, the homeschooling. We got a whole lot of things to work on. We're doing great with modern technology and moving ahead, but we're forgetting a lot of things too. And we're becoming a lot more introverted as we can sit at home and do Zoom meetings to do our line of work, or work from home, communicate from there, getting out, seeing packed stadiums, even in Edmonton, packed arenas and groups and crowds. That's something I do like seeing. It makes me, let's look at some things that make us happy. Let's look at some good things that are good for each other. And sports, don't underestimate how important they are, getting people together and socializing and having friendly competitive activities, even with some body checks and elbows in the corners now and then, is good for us. And we're seeing it again. We're not looking at fake cardboard cutouts of fans. The world's getting a little closer to normal. Unfortunately, not every bit of normal is necessarily good. Okay, so the other part before I get to Ms. Stirling is going to be reminding you of our sponsor, Bitcoin Well. Those guys have been a great sponsor for our show for quite some time, for the Standard in general. They're a Western Canadian company offering a great service. If you're interested in getting into digital currencies, this is the way to go, because hey, if you're dipping your toe into something that's new, you want to make sure you make educated decisions. And that's what Bitcoin Well is all about. They're there to help facilitate your entry into the digital currency world, particularly with Bitcoin, and to do it safely. Again, it seems like every day somebody's trying to rip you off. Somebody's trying to steal what you've worked for. Well, these guys are a publicly traded company out here in Western Canada. They will give personalized one-on-one service to help guide you through and safely invest your money, should you choose to. Maybe you'll sit down for one of those free consultations and decide, what, it's not for me. But it's out front, it's in the open, and it is a good, well-established, reliable company. So check them out. I'll talk a little bit more about them later. BitcoinWell.com. Take control of your money, guys. All right, let's bring in Michelle Stirling and talk about something else that gets the vein in my head pulsing, and that's the World Economic Forum and their plans for us under the guise of environmental stewardship. How's it going, Michelle?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. It gets my blood pumping too.
It's always good to have you back on. And boy, that's one of the things with these annual meetings is they sure give us a lot of fodder to work with, don't they?
Yeah, and curiously, people probably don't know this, but the World Economic Forum did a report in 2006 called Global Risk. And two of the global risks that they cited was global oil price shock and pandemic. But by 2020, they'd moved those completely off the list and replaced it all with climate change. So you have to wonder if people have actually manipulated the situation so they're cashing in on it right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of interests in there. I mean, it's hard to explain and discuss what that group is. It's the world's elites. They're gathered. They're business elites. They're political elites. And I had a bunch of people get upset over a tweet where I pointed out that they want centralized government, but with socialism. They say it's not socialism. There's going to be a bunch of rich people up top. Well, actually, if you look at most examples of socialism, that is how it works out, despite what they say. So I think it's a classic thing. But so the environment has been a big theme, this year. I mean, what I found crazy is a lot of them are talking, of course, they're still talking about strangling oil and gas while everybody's in the midst of an energy crisis.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. There was what is it, Christiane? What's her name? I sent it to you the other day.
Norway or?
Yeah, the woman from Norway. She was saying that, there it is, Norwegian finance CEO Kirsten Breithen was saying that the energy transition will create energy shortages and inflationary pressures, but the pain is worth it. I don't think you can find anybody out there who's enjoying paying all the extra prices, and especially in the UK and Europe, where, power prices and heating prices are just going through the roof, and it's also causing food shortages. Not just the war, just the fact that natural gas prices have skyrocketed means a lot of food processing can't be done, because ironically there's carbon dioxide as a byproduct, which is used for food processing, and a lot of the natural gas processors just can't operate anymore. It's not profitable. So, what pain is worth that? And in fact, as I was just pointing out to someone earlier, so far we haven't seen one wind turbine or one solar panel produced by wind or solar power. Until that happens, we better not rely on that as our future.
Yeah, and in saying that the pain is worth it, I see that as almost a vulgarity. It's easy for them to say, again, when you're elite, you're not dealing with figuring out how to pay your rent. You're actually globetrotting, staying in luxury hotels to tell everyone else to tighten their belt. It brings to mind David Suzuki with his multiple houses, going around telling everybody else that the pain is worth it to shut everything else down. The hypocrisy is galling. And I know most people see through it, but they got to understand that these are people who influence our world leaders.
Yeah, they're tremendously influential. And, I don't think that people actually know, but Clintel, the climate intelligence group out of the Netherlands, which has over 1,000 signatories who say there's no climate emergency, and they're all scientists and scholars. They sent a letter to the Swiss government asking them, how could the World Economic Forum have been granted host state status? So this is like giving them status equivalent to, say, the Red Cross, as if they're doing something great for the world. How could they have been granted status when they were the people who gave Greta Thunberg a stage to make her scary monologue to the world? I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And yet, in April 2021, when she testified to the US Congress, she said, "Oh, I don't literally want anyone to panic. That's just a metaphor." Well, so this group of influential business people who are all engaged in carbon markets and renewables and want to go green and climate initiatives use this young woman to scare millions of children and people around the world. And yet in their own mission statement, they claim that moral and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything the WEF does. And we are an organization accountable to all parts of society. Well, let's see some accountability. Let's see some accountability for the tweets that they were putting out during lockdown saying, lockdowns are improving the world. They had this little video, I don't know if people remember, where they had like a single individual on a skateboarding through this gutted, empty city. Like, people were committing suicide. Businesses were going bankrupt. People were losing their houses. Fentanyl overdoses were over the top. And this group of elites think that lockdowns are improving cities, and they want to do more lockdowns. They have another tweet out there. They want to do more. And so, they're a very dangerous group of people. And because they're transnational, they're unelected, they're unaccountable, how do you do anything to them, especially when they have this diplomatic immunity in Switzerland?
Yeah, and I mean, it was just gross, that picture, as you were speaking of, that image of the empty freeways and such, and trying to say this is a good thing. This is something to aspire to. We want to become some sort of impoverished, introverted society where everybody's locked in their homes living in poverty, because that'll theoretically, and there's the big theory, save Mother Earth. This is the only, if anything, it should backfire. It should make people realize this is how bad it would have to get before we even started to reduce to get towards those crazy climate targets that are always set for us.
Yeah, well, it's very dangerous ideology. You have to remember also there was a report that came out in the fall of 2019 called Exponential Roadmap. And this was done by very influential ENGOs like World Wild Fund and a whole assortment of these guys. But they wanted to cut emissions in half by 2030. And most of the things that they proposed actually were met by lockdowns. So I find that a very suspicious connection. Call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't care. Read the report yourself, Exponential Roadmap, and you'll see that the things they proposed were things like everyone work from home, no going to doctor's meetings, no going to school, because this cuts transportation emissions. And of course, for the billionaires associated with World Economic Forum, most of them in high tech, this was fantastic for them. They capitalized on it. They made bank while other people suffered. And especially things like fintech, which, financial technical startups, they'd been kind of a nothing business for 5 years or something, just laying there in the corner, not really doing anything. Boom, lockdown. I think their stocks went up like 300%. So, and all these WEF billionaires were early investors, just waiting for the opportunity for this to take off. So, and people can read a lot more about these guys. There's the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's one book. And the Davos Man, which is a new one. I haven't gone through this yet, but I started it, and it's the same shocking stuff about these elites, as you say, people who they really don't care about you and me. We're just useless eaters.
Yeah, well, that's about it. And I mean, something I think that's good, though, I mean, because the World Economic Forum has been around a long, long time. They've been holding these meetings for a long time, and nobody's really paid much attention to them or realized the amount of influence they have. And now that the world is kind of paying attention, the commoners, us unwashed, and realizing what the agenda of at least the people leading it. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions too. People seem to think just because somebody attended it doesn't mean they've embraced every aspect of what the leaders were saying at their speeches or things like that. But I mean, they don't hide their agenda whatsoever, the organization itself or Mr. Schwab. I mean, it's been in the open for quite some time, and people are suddenly realizing that.
Mm-hmm, yes. Well, we have about 3 or 4 different videos. One is called The Great Reset, in their own words, a Ponzi scheme. These are all on our YouTube channel. We were also very concerned after the Davos 2020 meeting because of the depopulation talk there. They featured Jane Goodall, who was saying, we wouldn't have any climate change problems if the population of the Earth was only 500 million. So you can take your own assumptions from that. And unfortunately, in the world of climate change, people have been using this RCP 8.5. I actually have the chart there. People have been referring to this set of scenarios, and the ones that the catastrophic claims come from using this scenario, which is deemed to be implausible. But these other scenarios have 3 billion fewer people in them. So in one that we did with Clintel, where they sent a message to the World Economic Forum on climate change, we tried to make that clear that, hopefully no one has decided, wow, there's a climate emergency, let's get rid of 3 billion people. But you can see how, devious minds might come up with that. And I mean, the unintended consequences of lockdown will be hundreds of thousands, millions of people who die prematurely, who suffer in great pain. And we have already seen that many people took their lives. So that is a depopulation program right there.
Well, and whether it's intentional or not intentional, I imagine for some of the crazed ideologues, and they exist, there's an anti-humanity type of ideologue out there, and a lot of them are in the environmental circles. They think that anything humans do is evil, and we should just basically get rid of people. They're self-loathing. It's a real problem. As far as I'm concerned, they need help, but they get into positions of influence. But now the other thing we're looking at is and again, not all of them necessarily are supporting it, but we've got a world food supply crisis coming down the pipe. And it's funny because we were warning, you and I were on the show talking about the energy crisis back last summer, saying, hey, Europe is up the creek. They're in big trouble. We got problems coming. And it wasn't heated. And now, due to with the Russia-Ukraine conflict on top of that, it's just become all the more acute. But now we can see it. Anybody looking at economics, anybody looking at supply chains, anybody looking at the regions where the war is, we got a really big food crisis coming. And they're not talking about that at the World Economic Forum. They're worried about reducing our carbon footprint.
Right. And, they're definitely not interested in helping people, say, in Egypt and Africa, where they get most of their wheat from the Ukraine. So, that material can't be shipped now. It's locked in port at the moment. And I just saw a video about it. And, that we're not talking about part of their food coming from there. We're talking about like 80% to some of these countries. And without that, people will die en masse. And the video I just saw was also talking about how in 2007, 2008, there was the Arab Spring. And most people said, oh, that's, because Egypt wants to be democratic. Well, it's because that part of the world was suffering food shortages and food price hikes. And there's a group of people called New England Complex Systems Institute. And they did a study showing that as food prices rise, civil unrest rises, and they could actually predict where in the world the next civil unrest would be based on their complex system analysis.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Somalia or anywhere in North Africa, and I can't presume on your date of birth by any means, but I'm old enough to remember the famines of the 80s and the early 90s. It was terrible.
Yeah.
North Africa was in Ethiopia. It was awful to see what was happening. And the reason we don't see it today is good modern. I mean, it didn't suddenly turn into good growing areas in Ethiopia and Somalia, and the populations didn't go down. But due to modern energy, modern transportation and supply chains, as you said, we've been able to bring in wheat and products from Ukraine and such down there to feed people. And that's not going to be coming down this year. We're going to see some serious problems.
Yeah, it's catastrophic. It's criminal. And as you say, these guys at the World Economic Forum, that should be, if they are in fact accountable to all parts of society, if they are in fact doing things with morality and integrity at the center of everything they do, then this should be the first thing on their agenda. And it might even be a climate war between Ukraine and Russia, despite the other things that have been said. But the World Economic Forum wants a global price on carbon by 2030. And Russia has never, ever bought into that ideology of climate change. We have on our website their rebuttal to the Kyoto Protocol from 2004, and they called climate change ideology a threat to human civilization. And I guess we're seeing that right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, Russia didn't take the BS, and that's part of why they became an energy powerhouse, because they weren't shackling themselves and they could provide product in volumes that the world demanded. And then suddenly, we're beholden to them. And something else that was interesting, listening to them talk about their great transition. And I heard a speech, I can't remember who was talking about it, but we're going to need cobalt and we're going to need lithium. And they said Canada might be able to. Well, even if you go that way, now you're still going to have some small single source areas that you're reliant on for your energy. And you're going to be vulnerable to energy crisis if there's any disruptions.
Yeah, you have to have a mix. And actually, there's fairly substantial evidence that Russia was funding most of the environmental groups to get Germany to not keep their nuclear plants online, to, not keep their coal plants open, to continue to buy Russian oil and gas. And, and sadly, I think Samuel Farfari, who's a professor emeritus of Belgian University, and an energy director general for the EU for 36 years. He wrote quite a thoughtful article about how the war could have been prevented simply by making a proper energy deal with the EU and Russia and Ukraine, and solve it in a financial, economic, negotiated, contractual way, because it makes the most sense, actually, for Russian oil and gas to feed Europe. Otherwise, Europe has to bring everything by boat, which is way more energy intensive. The prices are much higher. And, and then you're creating an enemy by not buying their product, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, and then meanwhile here in Canada, we have Trudeau. This is kind of throwing out a left field, but I imagine you've probably seen it and thought about it. They're looking to tax fertilizer now. They're actually looking to treat fertilizer as because they feel that it contributes to climate change, and start taxing it to reduce the use of it, which of course will reduce the amount of food when we're moving towards a world food crisis. This is the insanity of the ideology that's being pushed right now.
Yeah. There are a lot of people in the green movement who are very eager to go back to sort of organic farming. And this is a project that's happening in Europe right now. It's called the Food to Fork program. And this is including these things like reducing chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides, herbicides, and, going back to having cattle fertilize your field, which they do anyway. They'll just go out there and poop all over the place, and that's great. And their hooves dig up the ground, and you can see Marine Pools film about that. Return to Eden, that's on our website too. But you can't create mass food production with like my grandpa did, with a cowl around his neck, a yoked to an oxen. You can't do that. Like many millions more people will die. So we can't go back to that. And actually, there's lots of evidence showing that livestock doesn't create GHGs, that agricultural methods of today, the farmers are way smarter and far ahead of all these crazy environmentalists. And, it's just insane that the government is listening to ideologues and not the real people who do the real work. People are going to suffer and die.
I know, and I'm afraid it's going to be a cold comfort of being able to say, I told you so, 8-9 months from now, when we see starvation really starting to come into play in vulnerable areas such as Northern Africa, or you're one drought away from it in some South American countries or places all over. And if they were listening, I mean, as you said, if the World Economic Forum was an international group of elites who want to actually better the world, this should be the front and center subject of today. I'm sure economists have been asking for it. I'm sure agricultural experts have been pointing it out, supply chain experts, but they aren't talking about it. And that's really disturbing. And that really kind of exposes them for what they are.
Yeah. Green grifters, all of them. Yep.
Well, we'll watch and see. As I said, the one little upside is, hey, people are paying attention to them more than they ever have before. And people are realizing it, like so many of the other conspiracy theories out there, well, they weren't actually so much a conspiracy once the facts came out. So I think, kind of like a vampire, that shining a light on it and exposing it is going to be what takes their power away. And we're working towards that. But unfortunately, I think that these ideologues in the world stage are going to cause a lot of suffering and damage before we can finally get them under control.
Yeah, well, and they all own big tech. This is the real problem. And they own a lot of the media. After Greta made her appearance there, Mark Bainoff of Salesforce, who's part of the World Economic Forum, he put her on the cover of Time. He owns Time, so, and Mark Carney, he's a trustee there. And what did Mark do? He told companies that if you don't get on the climate change bandwagon, you'll go bankrupt. So, these people are just shooting their mouth off all over the place and making a mess of the world. And we can't really do a lot about it because they're not elected, they're not accountable, and they're transnational. So send your letters to the Swiss government like Clintel did. You can see that letter on our website, on our blog.
Great. Now, actually, since you brought it up, and to close it out, I appreciate you coming on to talk to us. It's always great when we have you on. Where can we find more information about Friends of Science and yourself, and where you're documenting all this? Because your site's a great resource. I mean, it's if you want to drill down and find a lot of stuff, it's there.
Thank you. Well, you can look at www.friendsofscience.org. We're now going into our 20th year of operation. We're a nonprofit run by volunteers, and we just love it if people would help us with our campaign. going into our 20th year, we're asking our followers if they donate maybe $20 for our 20 years. You can donate more, but you can just send it by e-transfer to contact@friendsofscience.org. And we've got, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, of course. So look and see what we've got, and we welcome any comments.
Great. Well, thanks again, Michelle. Always good talking to you, and I hope we can talk again sometime soon.
Thank you, Cory.
So that was Michelle Stirling of Friends of Science. And if you didn't catch all those listings of where to find them, of course, that's the great thing with the internet. Just Google Friends of Science and you'll find all sorts of links and resources. And as I said, their site's deep. It's a great spot. If I'm searching stuff out for some of my ranting columns and such, I quite often suddenly find myself there to get my stats and numbers on things, because they are, as their name says, Friends of Science. They're just looking at the numbers. Michelle's a principled person. I think if she saw stats saying the world was warming up at 5 degrees a week, she would be bringing that up as a big concern as well. So, I'm going to speak to my next sponsor, and it's funny. Some people would see the timing of it as being wrong, but I think it's right. It's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and in light of the horrible shooting in Texas, people say, well, why do I don't think about a Canadian Shooting Sports Association? But actually, I think associations like this are more important than ever, because this is an association of non-psychopaths. This is an association of people who want responsible use of firearms. They're as horrified as anybody else when they see the firearms being improperly used for such harm. And as we know, the vast majority of firearm owners, they never want to hurt anybody, absolutely. And we want to see reasonable regulations, reasonable laws, and and strong cracking down on the illegal use of firearms. That's part of what they're about, and that's part of what they put out as a part of their agenda, I guess you could say, with things. And they're an association, so they offer courses in safe usage of firearms. They're showing where there's sports, trap shooting, target shooting, black powder. There's a lot of things that can be done with firearms that, unfortunately, the most horrific uses are done out there as well. So we can differentiate between these things. We can stand up for our ability for the people who want to safely utilize firearms, while condemning the horrible misuse of it in the worst possible way you saw yesterday. So check them out, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. You can Google them, CSSA-CIA.org. And and getting on to more nuanced discussion, I do like the comment scroll, guys. I like seeing some other things. One of the things pointed out by another one, because I'm seeking solutions, because I don't have any on this one. As I said, I got more questions than answers. And for a bloviating blowhard like myself, that's a rare circumstance. But this is just so terrible. And if I knew a magic bullet, I wouldn't care about ideology. I would be pushing it as hard as I can. The solution to this epidemic of murders and school shootings is going to be a complicated one with a lot of factors. Somebody brought one up that I'm sorry, I can't remember which commenter it was. I saw it when Michelle was talking, though, about the family breakdown, and because I was saying, well, what's changed? What's changed in this last 30, 40 years that's really bringing so much more of this about? And that's another factor. It really is. But how do you address that one, right? Like, that one's tough. People bring it up, and often it gets dismissed as, oh, you're being racist, especially when it comes to the American discussion, because some people point out that minority communities often are less inclined to have, I guess you could say, intact families over the long run. And there's lots and lots of studies that, particularly with young men, if they're raised in a fatherless household, there's a much higher chance that they're going to stray from the path, and get into trouble or have problems down the road, whether it's gang activity or shootings. And that doesn't have anything to do with race. It's in any household. If you can keep a family together, the chances for the kids are better. But how do you solve that? Where do we go? It's not to say it can't be solved, but we got to talk about these things. We got to look at all these things. And, look at it today. There's some aspects, I guess, on how easily people get divorced today compared to in the past. I know I've been through it. But was it necessarily better 80 years ago when a couple would stay together, even if one member of the couple or the other was abusive? You just had to grin and bear it and stay within there. Was that better for the family unit? Was it better for the household? I think perhaps we give up too easily on our relationships, and we split a lot too quickly. And it's made, for a mess. And again, a lot of broken homes, which again, that doesn't mean they're necessarily dysfunctional. There's plenty of single parent homes or new parents and so on that do fine. But I want to open it up, as I said, to every bit of the conversation on this one, because there's just not enough answers and there's so many questions. And whatever I don't think there'll ever be a permanent solution, but we can mitigate, we can reduce, we can find out a little bit of what's at the root of this and stop this trend from growing. It's just so bad. And Dash Riprock saying stop shootings is easy, armed security done. No, Dash, it's not. I do believe having more armed people may help with things, but you see, easy? No, it's not easy. That's just one element out of what I think are dozens and dozens of elements. And shooters don't like people firing back at them, as Dash is saying. Well, that's fine. But, it's something I've worked in the States a lot in open carry areas and everything. And most people who I saw in Texas say, we're open carry and so on, perfectly responsible people who aren't going to harm anybody. But I saw some that I'm not sure how they tied their shoes right. And if there was a crisis situation in a crowd, I'm not sure if I want this clown firing out there as well. This could compound a moderate problem into a massive problem. So don't assume, and I'm not trying to totally dismiss open carry or having more people armed. I'm just saying it's not a quick or necessarily a solution. This is all nuanced and complicated. And that's why we need the discussions. Like I said, I don't want to fight with anybody who's proposing solutions because I can't think of them. So by all means, keep throwing them out there. But that one has it cuts both ways, I guess. Don't assume that another armed person, even if well-meaning, would necessarily do good. I mean, let's remember, there's a whole lot of idiots out there. I think George Carlin said it best, go out there and take a pad and paper and look around and write it down. Look at your average idiot and write down how many there are. And then think about it. Half of the world is dumber than them. So that's your average idiot. So arming them all, well, it's an aspect. And Dash is saying further, of course, screening must be done. Fine, and I agree with that. Somebody was saying earlier, too, when I talked about that with background checks and screening, and they say they do have that in the state. Actually, it's very much state by state as to what the requirements are, waiting lists, things like that. Again, no magic, cure for anything to have one policy or another. Would a waiting period have stopped this? I mean, it sounds like in the case of yesterday that this guy turned 18, went in and just bought some firearms, and he was ready to roll. But still, this was clearly a psychopathic kid. If he had waited a week, would it have stopped him? If you made, he's an 18-year-old, I don't know, presumably with no prior records. If you made him fill out some forms and wait a month, would it have stopped him? I mean, if somebody's really determined, they might do it. Or even if you declined this person in getting a firearm, well, he might have been able to get an illegal one. See, there's no easy way. But at the same time, something has to change. I don't think anybody can look at the circumstance, look at the stats, look at the numbers, and pretend that there's not a problem and a growing one. I mean, I'm old enough. I didn't grow up seeing this kind of shooting all the time on the news all the time. And I mean, the numbers support that. There weren't school shootings like this. There weren't mass shootings like this 40 years ago. So something is going terribly wrong. So let's talk about it and figure out what the hell it is. Because it's if we don't find out what it is and at least stop it, it's going to actually get worse. So, it's just man, I like ranting about stuff, but this one's just so depressing when it gets going. I'd rather rant about bad policies and things, just not something as vile as this. Let's bring in and pivot and change the subject here. We'll bring in Mr. Makichuk, and we're going to talk about some, serious subject matter, absolutely, and that's the treatment of our own Canadian citizens in our justice system. And that's with Tamara Lich, who it turns out they didn't manage to throw her back in jail, but boy, they sure wanted to. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm okay. Like I said, it's a rough day on that stuff.
It is a rough day. It's a terrible day. I just watched Beto O'Rourke crash the press conference in Texas, and it was just like something out of I haven't seen anything like it. They had the cops had to get him out, and oh my God, it's just a mess. The whole thing is just a mess. Very sad. It's terrible. It's terrible. Like you said, what can we do? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
No, and I'm all ears. I really am. I'm more receptive to hearing other views than I ever have been when we see a harsh reality. So, that's pretty politicized. Hopefully when things cool down a bit and we'll see some more ration things rather than O'Rourke, making a fool of himself or other people, coming up with more extreme solutions on the conservative side as well. It's just, let's think harder and what works. So getting to what I wanted to talk to you about was a column you'd written recently. I mean, you crossed actually a couple of subjects with it, but you closed more with and linking to Linda Slobodian's piece, but just on this ongoing vendetta against Tamara Lich. I mean, this is something else in a democratic country. Can you believe this is happening right now?
It's unbelievable. I have to tell you, like I said, I mean, I've hung around this country a while. And I've seen a lot of things, and I've been in the media, and I have never seen anything so outrageous. And get this today. Thank God there is one justice in this country who said that the bail terms hearing for Tamara Lich basically stated that she was going to do time, big time, major league time. Imagine that, and which is terrible. Like, we're going to throw you away. We're going to, okay. And what does Philip say? He said, guys, she's presumed innocent. Duh. We have something called rule of law in Canada. And it took a justice to come up and say, isn't she innocent? And it's not necessarily a fact that she's going to do any jail time, or what jail time that is. That's to be determined by the law, by a court. And he said, he warned her, and he said, look, before the Queen, it's he who laughs last laughs best. So he kind of warned her, but basically he said, no, you can go to Ottawa go see your daughter who's attending secondary school, and you're not going back to jail. You're not. I mean, so it's unbelievable. It just is incredible that this is actually happening. Can you imagine that? A judge reminding an assistant crown attorney whose demeanor was disappointed the judge because he had no case. So he was, he doth protest too much. And the judge obviously saw through it, right?
No, he
and
seemed
thank God for that. Thank God for that.
Yeah, because we were listening to it in the newsroom. Amanda had it playing in the background, had to suffer through it, last week. And this prosecutor was just right over the top. And yes, as you said, it's great that the judge called him out. But man, why such a vendetta? Why so strongly on this? I mean, we understand how bail works. If Lich had been out there organizing, if we'd seen she's been putting up Facebook posting, hey, everybody, gather the trucks, let's do it again. Here's where you send new fundraising. I mean, all of those other bail conditions, I'd throw up my hands too and say, geez, Tamara, I think you're great, but you kind of are asking for it here. All she did was say yes to an award on an email. That's it. And they figured that's enough to go after her.
And again, Justice Phillips made a very good ruling. He said that the award has nothing to do with they're not connected. They're not connected. So that doesn't mean that she can accept it or whatever. But she said she's not going to go to, go there to accept the award. But maybe that's to be determined. I don't know. But in any case, he said they're not connected. And, and the federal government is going after her. I mean, it's not like she was planting IEDs on the side of the road, for God's sake. Why are we putting her in our own little gitmo? Is that what Trudeau? I mean, and you ask, why is this happening? Well, our prime minister is in Vancouver, or was in Vancouver. I don't know if he's still there, or if maybe he's surfing. Maybe he's out there surfing. He loves surfing, right? So, he said, well, he's there talking about things. Aside from he appeared with some ceremonies and stuff with the First Nations, which is great. But he basically used that as a platform to call us all right-wing terrorists, like to talk about the right-wing terrorism Canada. Like, what? Like, is this the people who we're fighting for freedom? They're terrorists? Are you a terrorist, Cory? Am I? Are we next? Are we on the list? And he said he's working closely, with CSIS, and God help us with those guys, and to get at these terrorists. Does that mean make me? I'm an Alberta separatist. I'm a very strong Alberta separatist. I would like to see some autonomy from Alberta. I don't want to necessarily see us go our own way, but in some ways I think it's our only option. But does that make me an enemy of the state? Was Trudeau talking about me on the coast? Was he talking about Fred and Martha, who donated $20 to the Freedom thing? And yet Trudeau had the audacity after he gave $10 million to Omar Khadr. And regardless whether Khadr deserved it or not, I'm not going to get into that. But I will say this. He said, we have to protect rights in a just society, whether it's unpopular or popular. Well, for God's sake, how hypocritical can you possibly be and go after this woman? You know what I mean? Like, for God's sake, thank God, and hopefully a court of law will prevail. Maybe and it was that Liberal judge, I think, Linda. Oh, by the way, I must give credit to Linda for an absolutely fabulous piece. I read it, and I just got inspired to respond to it. And Linda did a great job on that. But she basically said this Liberal judge in Ontario was the one who said, you're going up the creek, lady. We're going to send you to Alcatraz. You're going. And his bail conditions. What kind of idiocy is that? You and I deserve to be presumed innocent, for Christ's sakes.
Well, part of it is their narrative is falling apart. It really is. I mean, a term I've been seeing a lot on social media from some of the liberal fart catchers making excuses for this is insurrectionists. That's a word they keep throwing out as a hot word. She was supporting an insurrection. Let's get real. The only evidence they have of that was some handful of kooks put a Facebook posting up saying they felt they'd be able to replace the governor general and the prime minister and put in some government. That didn't represent the protest. That had nothing to do with her, and it wasn't realistic. It was just a handful of crackpots. But they're using that as a justification to come down on Lich. I mean, she'd be charged if that was the real case. Insurrection is illegal. They would have much more serious things than mischief charges if that's really what she had done.
Is an insurrectionist a person who wants to make the country a better place? I mean, come on. What they were embarrassed because that Ottawa, that Freedom Convoy took over the city for a long time, and His Royal Highness wouldn't come out and talk to them. He would rather paint them with one brush and say they were all Nazis and ridiculous. Yet I was talking to Mike Thomas about this, and Mike was saying, because I said, look, CSIS is going after Canadian extremism and hateful rhetoric. What exactly does that mean? And we both concluded that really none of their fears, their so-called fears, came true. None of it. You know what I mean? No. It's all exaggerated. It's blown out of proportion. It's amplified times 10. And thankfully, this Judge Phillips, I really have to commend him for standing up for rule of law. Thank God. Thank God. Obviously the Liberals didn't buy him out or whatever. That guy is. I think he's trying to be fair, which is great, which is really good, and thank God for that, boy. I tell you. But I just say I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen. You know what? It's payback. It's payback for their embarrassment. Let's go after her, no matter what. Just like when Bobby Kennedy went after Jimmy Hoffa, it wasn't like he did this. Okay, so no. You get 20 guys in a room, try to find something on somebody. And of course they found something on Hoffa and put him away. So it's almost like that. It's almost like, okay, now let's see, we got to put her away for something. So let's just keep harping on her and making her life miserable.
Well, and I think part of the issue too, as Sylvia pointed out, they're using her association with Pat King for some of the things he said. See, Pat King is kind of everything that the people opposed to the truckers' protest point at, because Pat King is a bit of a haywire individual. He says some things that are offensive to pretty much everybody. He got associated with the convoy, and he didn't represent a lot of them. I think they would be thrilled to have Pat King actually out there on social media just to keep demonstrating and showing how wacko some of the people, a very tiny minority of the people, were. But Tamara Lich, you see, she's the opposite. She's well-spoken. She's a law-abiding citizen. She's a mother. I think she might be a grandmother. She's not a raving lunatic with her hair in the air calling for insurrection or any of that. And that's why they want her out of sight, because she and her very existence undercuts their whole case that this was insurrection led by crazy people. It wasn't at all. This was just somebody who could have been your neighbor down the street, and they hate that.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly. I mean, you said it quite well there. And when this convoy started, it as it moved along, it kind of changed and it caught momentum and it changed, and then these other people glommed onto it. But I mean, they're just attacking. And one of the things I said as I finished my column is, if it happens to her, it can happen to you. You could be next. So, watch your P's and Q's, because times are changing. And if they can do this to her, they can do it to you. They can do it to anybody. They can break you down. And hopefully the rule of law will be the way we go. And that's the way we should go in this case. And she's got good, a good lawyer, of course, a very good lawyer. And hopefully that will come out in the end, and the truth has to come out. Well, that's what we're saying. We're saying the truth. Is that such a terrible thing for the truth to come out?
The next thing I expect to see whenever it happens is when she, as you said, she's innocent until proven guilty. She is waiting for trial. And in our system, I mean, it would be very expensive if we kept everybody incarcerated all the way till, not to mention inhumane, until trial time, unless they were presenting an immediate risk to society. But something I got a feeling the first thing they're going to ask for when her trial comes is a gag order, because they're not going to want to hear what's coming out in that courtroom when this prosecutor, whether it's a different one or another one, tries to make the case that this is a crazed insurrectionist and they don't have any evidence for it, and they're going to look all the worse. So there's just where I'll lay my money on a bet. I mean, I'm failing on the Battle of Alberta, but I will bet they will throw a gag order on this, because they will not want the public to see what's going on in there.
I totally agree. I think you're exactly right. I think they will try and limit it as much as they possibly can, whether they say it's national security or God knows what, or they will try and control this as much as they can. And they're very powerful. They can. There's other avenues they can take, I suppose. I don't know. But I hope that for the sake of her and for all Canadians who may have, I wouldn't say different ideas, but I would say who say, well, look, I don't think that's right, and I disagree, and I'm not necessarily, but to be labeling, our Prime Minister labeling, going that far and just going out on this bizarre tangent for Canada. I mean, it just, again, there's no evidence. There was no evidence whatsoever of any of the fears of CSIS at the Freedom Convoy. As far as we know, there was nothing. There really wasn't anything other than, like you said, some people latched on who may not have been, as squeaky clean as we would want, but that's just the way it went. I mean, it's, and I think in all countries we have, I mean, don't we all have a certain amount of people who, like you were mentioning earlier, the idiots.
Well, sure.
Like you were saying with the comedian, that was actually a really good line about just take a pen and paper and look around. I mean, but anyway, I think you're right. I think they're going to try and control it, and innocent till proven guilty.
Well,
Presumption Innocence, for God's sake.
I wouldn't support this kind of treatment of a left-wing protester who I didn't like their cause. I wouldn't. I mean, unless they were acting out between their first charge and their court date, I would say, well, we'll wait till the court date. I mean, we got to get realistic. Locking them up incommunicado for months, that's not what a civilized country does. So, I mean, all we can do is hope, though, as you said, that judge was very principled. That's just on the case of this bail hearing. Well, let's hope there's another principled judge weighs the facts when the time comes. I mean, realistically, these are mischief charges. This is somebody who's not presenting a risk to society. I can't see how anything more than time served and a fine would I mean, that's just me certainly guessing, but would be at best appropriate, if not an acquittal, because it's just a little much.
Well, and just briefly, let's face it, this is a test of our democracy. This is a test of our democracy. The fact that they brought in the emergency measures has hurt our reputation abroad. People are now questioning, what is this guy doing? Even some of the liberal commentators in the United States, talk shows were like, what the hell is this guy doing? Is he out of his mind? Is he nuts? So this is going to be a test of our democracy, and if we throw this woman away in jail for leading a freedom convoy, I mean, it's just, I can't believe it. I'm just shocked how far it's gone. I could see her getting a slap on the wrist, a legal slap on the wrist, but it's like they're expending every ounce of their energy. Trudeau obviously wants her, thrown into the clink. It's got to be him. It's got to be him.
Him and those around him. Well, thanks for writing on it and coming on to talk to us about today. It's Dave Makichuk. You can find him in usually the opinions section of the Western Standard, among other places. You got anything else coming down the pipes people should be watching for, Dave?
I'm actually doing a piece today on Top Gun, which is coming out. Is it tomorrow? Is it tomorrow it comes out? I think, or this week it comes out. And of course, there's all about it'll be a great movie. I'm a big Top Gun fan, and it's going to be a great movie. But the fact of the matter is that some experts are saying that aerial dogfighting, is actually obsolete. So I think that might be an interesting read. And that's coming up today or tomorrow. It depends on Dave's schedule.
Well, yeah, Dave's always hard at it. So right on. Well, thanks for coming on to talk. Always fun, Dave. And we'll talk again soon. Looking forward to that piece.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Cory. Take care.
Thanks. So a reminder again, that was Dave Makichuk. And yeah, just everybody's shaking their heads wondering what the hell is going on in this country, particularly in her case. June Marie, a commenter, brought up something else, saying, I wish Cory would talk about the whole Coots debacle. These guys are being charged with conspiracy to commit murder, but no evidence has been brought forward. I think I might have mentioned that before a while back, and I'll just follow up a little further now. I do actually know one of the people who was charged with one of the more serious of the offenses there. And I don't have any inside knowledge on what's going on. I haven't been in touch. I don't know what's going on, but I feel just even with that alone, I'm just going to stay off of that one. We got a lot of other news people and people covering it, but it just isn't one area that I'm going to poke into just because there's a bit of a connection and it just doesn't feel appropriate to go into it. Because again, at the same time, people, I don't want them to interpret anything I'd speak on that issue as if I know anything more than you do on it. I don't. I know the individual, one of them, and I just don't want to dip into that one. It's just too close that way. It's just being fair and where things are. Other people will cover it. I am interested to see what happens on there. It's quite, that's a whole separate affair going on down there as opposed to the rest of the convoy. And we'll see what happens. But the lack of information on it has been interesting. We aren't hearing a lot. So I'll be watching and waiting with the rest of you as well. I'll hit our sponsor one more time here before I carry on further, and that is Bitcoin. Well, those guys there, they are a good sponsor and a good service and good Albertans, good Canadians. While we're still all in Canada for now, they're a Western Canadian company. Their name kind of says it all. Bitcoin Well, it's the place where you go to get involved in Bitcoin should you choose to. As it says there, Bitcoin is for everyone. And it shows they got Bitcoin Academy, they call it. And it's through Athabasca University, courses on there to help you learn what it's about, learn how these digital currencies work. And what I like is they show there, you can see learn, buy and sell and use for those who can't see the graphics. And it makes Bitcoin understandable and practical. You know, it's not just something you necessarily, I mean, it's up to you. You might want to buy it and just sit on it, or you might want to use it like any other currency. You might want to pay your utility bills or, you know, pay mortgages, whatever you're going to do. These guys set up how you can do that, help you, walk you through it safely. So your money is in your control all the time. And yes, again, a trustworthy, good, local, one-on-one sort of service in Western Canada. So if you're looking to get into digital currencies, guys, bitcoinwell.com and take control of your money. All right. So let's see, Brad. Yeah, did my cougar move on? Yeah, Dave, I like bringing those up a few times. I live, again, just south of the city, and my house backs into a bunch of bush. And I do get a lot of wildlife back there on my game cam. And for a little while, I had a cougar hanging around for about a 10, 12-day period. I haven't seen anything on that camera aside from a young fox in the last week or so. So it's gotten quiet back there. Brad, maybe those big goofy dogs might have scared them off. But I always get stuff passing through. Knucklehead saying, if I don't have a mobile phone, can I still use the Bitcoin Well service? I believe so. I mean, a lot of their stuff's online. I would suggest looking them up, bitcoinwell.com, and they can, you know, you can figure out how your communications would work and how you might want to take part in their service if it's for you. So I don't think a phone is necessary, but being online and, of course, connected to a degree with digital currencies is a requirement. Set up your wallet, ledger, and all that good stuff. All right, let's look at some more new stuff before we carry on here. Let's see. This is a neat one. The press bailout. So we got to remember, and yeah, here's a sickening one, particularly for us in alternative media, because the government's been giving, $600 million to the newspapers and a bunch. And the cabinet, because they've been asked about it, invoke confidentiality. They're refusing to detail who they paid and how much. Of course they are. If you really want to see who they paid and how much, look to which newspapers have their noses deepest in Trudeau's butt. If you see nothing but editorial comment that's throwing out the liberal line, I betcha there's a pretty good chance they took a lot of the media bailout. Just a suspicion on my part. So even if cabinet won't tell us who it is, I think we can kind of see who it is for ourselves. That's part of why things were so disgustingly slanted during the convoy protests. That's why so many people turned away. I mean, our membership exploded during that period because people were so repulsed by the mainstream media because basically they were just reprinting and regurgitating the government's talking points and calling it news. Well, what do you expect when they're completely reliant on the government to pay their bills? There's no getting rich in independent media. We do okay. We're paid. It's fine. That's why I come in. But there's a nice satisfaction in being here and knowing I don't have to dangle to the agenda of some benefactor, funder, government, something like that. I've got limitations. If I went off the handle, I'm certain Derek would come in and shut me down pretty fast, but I'm not beholden to the government or anybody else, and nor are anybody else around here. That's why independent media is so important, and the government sees it. So they've actually invoked cabinet confidentiality because they were asked about it. Well, who's getting the money? Where is it going? Oh, we can't talk about that. It's confidential. Why not? It's our money. Shouldn't be confidential a bit. It's our money. You don't get to tell us where you spent it and where you didn't spend it, but well, actually they do. That's the way we are with this setup we have in Canada where they're controlling information. Just a heads up, and I'll mention it again later, but I'm going to have Michael Geist on tomorrow. He's a professor. He's always talked about information technology and things like that, and he's been very strong in that area. And I'm looking forward to that discussion because this is a government that's been obsessed with controlling information, obsessed with controlling the messaging and what you get to hear and what you don't get to hear. And the carrot is the dangling of these subsidies, these newspapers and television outlets that they basically bought. The stick, that's C11. And that's some of these policies where they're going to use it to swat at outlets like ourselves that are independent. We got quite a battle going on here right now. And, so here's some of the BS that you hear somebody. So, for this bailout, this is Bob Cox. I guess he was talking to in an interview saying, and he chaired a panel of these executives appointed by the Department of Heritage to design the subsidy plan for the outlets. He says, when I'm out and about, people congratulated me and told me it's a good thing for news media across the country. This is Bob Cox, then publisher of the Winnipeg Free Press, and chair of News Media Canada. Yeah, everybody was out saying, I want the government to buy the media. I bet, Bob. Yeah, they were out there in droves just patting you on the back, weren't you? I'll take things that never happened for 500, Alex. Come on, this is BS. But these are the guys out there. I mean, these are guys within the media, and they're sucking in the money. They're subsidized, and they're selling their media souls for this. We're not allowed to find out who gets these subsidies, who's getting them, who is qualifying, and it is problematic. So yeah, they amended the Income Tax Act to pay 25% payroll rebates to $13,750 per newsroom employee. Too, and there's the quote, qualified Canadian journalism organizations. You got to remember, they determine who is or isn't. It's up to them. That's why they want to make sure that caveat's always there. Because if they don't hold the power to choose who is and isn't eligible for it, well, then they can't control what you're saying. They can't make sure that there's always an underlying threat that, hey, if you say naughty things and mean things about government, we're going to pull your status. And that's what they'll do. Come on. So, yeah, we're not allowed to find out how much. But as I said, all you have to do is see what they're saying. You know which ones are beholden to the Trudeau government. Let's see another. This one's interesting. You know, there's predictions, and this is from Paula Simons, and I've been critical of her. I've been celebratory too. She did some fantastic work as a journalist in Edmonton, exposing some of the stuff in the foster system with a young girl who was murdered in care and a whole bunch of problems there. If you look that up with Paula Simons, she did get appointed though by the Liberals into the Senate, and of course they always say, "Oh, these are independent senators." Oh, BS. When you're appointed by a Liberal, you stay Liberal. Paula Simons showed that when she supported bills C-69 and C-48, which were the anti-pipeline, anti-tanker bills. She voted in favor of those. No Albertan who pretends to be supporting Albertan views would support those bills. But she did show some independence, at least with this cabinet bill, is this detailing legal grounds to search travelers' cell phones and laptops. And she says it might lead to political witch hunts. So let's give credit where it's due. I'm glad she's bringing it up. She's saying travelers could be targeted for phone and computer searches based on their political views. And she's saying it would put the privacy rights of thousands of Canadian travelers in real jeopardy. So these bills that slide through, every bill we're getting from the government right now is another one chipping away at our rights to privacy, our rights to speech, our rights to movement, our rights just not to wear a friggin' mask on an airplane. Well, they're going after this, and this is through Senate. So this is an act to amend the Customs Act, but it's basically giving border service agents, again, government agents, more power, unlimited, in fact, to get in and surrender your passwords to your electronic devices. Yes, this is a problem. This is big. And a reason why are they looking for your, history, your political history? Because we can't. This government's political. They can claim they're looking for criminal stuff. Yeah, right. And again, it's not with a warrant. This is them demanding it while you're at the border, while you're vulnerable. And searching through your personal items and phones is a reasonable concern in not wanting to give them the authority for that. I mean, it's none of their business what's on there. It's none of their business what's on your phone. You get a warrant. Come back with a warrant. A phone nowadays is more than just a phone. I mean, it's an extension of what people have, what they do, who they've been communicating with, who they have memberships with, where they've been buying things. We do everything on our phone. It's a little portable computer with us at all times. And I don't necessarily want to share what I have on there with some random border agent because they feel that I might have done something the wrong way. I mean, again, there's nothing they're going to find on mine. It's not their bloody business, though. So, yeah, this is stuff they're sliding through. So I'm glad Paula Simons, Senator Simons, is bringing this up. I hope this bill dies, though I doubt it. There's not many bills die from this government, even though it's a minority one, because they made a deal with the NDP. Jagmeet Singh, he's a sad specimen of a politician, but he'll exercise what influence he can. So, yeah, just more and more, guys. You're losing every right you have. The Canada Post Corporation Act forbids police from intercepting mail in transit. The Border Services Agency can't inspect any mail under 30 grams. You see, that's an interesting point that's brought up in this story. The reasoning that comes up out of the blue with this is because if it's not smuggling something physical, so something under 30 grams, it's just communication, it's not their business to go in and read it. So they ban that. Or they have for a long time. They understand the difference between keeping people's privacy intact and keeping the public safe. But your phone contains a whole hell of a lot more than one letter, and they don't feel they should protect that. They don't feel that, you should have your health data looked into, or your Tinder account, or your Grinder account, or whatever your thing is, if there's one on there, or photographs, or confidential professional documents. There's all sorts of things you might have on your phone you don't want to share with some guy at the border, but you're going to lose that right. And they might be able to snap their fingers and say, we're going to lock you up till you give us the password. I mean, they're saying, they try to justify it because there's been some people caught with child porn. Yeah, it's a horrible, awful thing. And I want to go after child pornographers, people who carry it on their phones or their computers, people who spread it, of course, the people who produce it. But there's a reason we have warrants, guys. There's a reason we have process. There's a reason the rights still have to come first. And giving complete arbitrary power to government agents at the border to search is not where we want to go. Something else Dave brought up. This was a beautiful one, eh? So suing, there's a class action lawsuit. Looks like whether it's going to go further in the Quebec courts. But the green car of the year, yes, Canada's 2017 green car of the year, the Chevrolet Bolt. Well, it's a piece of crap. Overpriced piece of junk, just like a lot of the electric overrated stuff is. And seeing he brought a used model on claims that it would run up to 383 kilometers between charges, which is pretty crappy range anyways when you got to wait that long. But the range, it turns out, doesn't even reach 300 kilometers in winter. Also, the recharging time is much, much longer in winter because, again, they seem to put all their stats out based on ideal California weather or something. But they knew about this apparently as early as 2017, but still kept selling on those basis, on those false claims of how great these electric vehicles are. And the lawsuit hasn't been certified yet, but Bolt buyers are looking to claim a $38,000 refund plus some punitive damages. It'll be interesting to see where that one goes. They're oversold things, and are people being ripped off? It's quite a concern. And that's even after federal rebates, of course, because they're trying to bribe us with their own money to buy something we don't want. Getting back to climate change, let's look at this beauty. Forest burning like it's 1870. Yeah, forest fires in northern Canada. Here's some things when we get to the numbers. This is why I like having friends of science on. Forest fires in northern Canada no more frequent than they were in the 19th century. So the Department of Natural Resources and Cabinet keeps blaming wildfires and climate change, but we're not having more fires. We aren't. The decline in fire frequency is due to a decline in human-caused ignitions, it says in a study. The current rate of burning is still lower than historic levels. You see, the difference now is there's a couple of things going on. One, we see it. We have social media. We have TV. We see the ravages of a fire when it goes. We get the live coverage of it when it moves in. The other thing is we've got people living in forested areas that never lived there before, so it's a hell of a lot more damaging. But it's natural for these forests to burn. They always have. They always will. And unfortunately, when you live within them, my house backs into a forest. I'm a little fearful of that all the time. I mean, I clear brush around my place and do what I can, but if that whole forest went up, I got a feeling, my log home would probably not fare terribly well. But that's my choice in moving into a forested area. If I wanted to avoid that, I could buy a place out by Vulcan, Alberta, where there's not a tree for 50 miles. But the frequency isn't up. Every time we have a big forest fire, you get the climate kooks coming out saying this wouldn't happen if we would just buy electric cars or have more carbon taxes because carbon taxes put fires out. It's not true. We aren't burning more. We're just hearing more about it. The numbers don't add up to the rhetoric. So remember these things as they come out, because of course there's going to be more fires somewhere this summer. There always are. There always have been. There have been since the history of fire and wood. And we want to control it. We want to mitigate. We want to reduce risks of things, but let's quit pretending that we have some increase in forest fires because of climate change. We don't. Another thing that's happening is forest management has not been going well. And I've talked about that before. I worked in the bush a lot in the past. I was a surveyor. And you get in some of these areas that are highly populated. Well, because of fire suppression, the forest hasn't burned in a long, long time. And you see, when you're hiking through that as a surveyor, it was miserable. The amount of undergrowth and deadwood and fire ladders and everything all built up in there. It's a tinderbox waiting to go off. And it's because it's a populated area. When I'm way up in the north, or when it was, the bush wasn't necessarily that bad because every 50, 60 years or so, it would all burn and rejuvenate. But we stunt it, artificially in populated areas. But it also means when a fire comes, and it's not if, it's when, then it will burn with a lot more intensity because it has all that fuel there. So we got to think a little harder. I mean, logging, bush clearing, or prescribed burns, there's a lot of things we could do. But again, you get in the populated area and there's every NIMBY, oh my God, you can't take down those trees that I see on the hill over there. I'll have to look at a cut block. It'll be evil. Or you can't do a prescribed burn because it'll smell stinky and make my couch stink. But in the meantime, you end up in a dangerous circumstance with potential forest fires around you. Okay, well, that's enough rambling out of me today, guys. I got a couple of good guests coming on tomorrow. Going to have John Mulberg. He's the leader of the Alberta Buffalo Party. Yes, we have yet another provincial party, and John Mulberg is the leader of it. They kind of slid under the radar. They came out publicly a little while ago with a new leader, and we'll see what they have to offer. How many conservative type provincial political parties can we sustain? But we'll find out from Mr. Mulberg as to why he feels that their party should be the one to head to. And as I said, Professor Michael Geist on C11 and information issues and internet and things such as that. That's going to be a really good conversation as well. And of course, all the news and check-ins and good stuff to follow with that. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. And I will see you all tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time sharp.